The Galactic Council Chamber was a grand structure of gleaming metal and shifting holographic walls. Located on Zarkesh, the neutral heart of the galaxy, the chamber had seen centuries of politics, intrigue, and power plays. Today, it hummed with an undercurrent of unease. Jenna Voss, human diplomat and the youngest to ever represent Earth, stood at the center, flanked by her aides. She adjusted her dark blue blazer, the symbol of humanity's official presence, and took a deep breath. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on her. The room, a massive circle of high-backed chairs, was filled with representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with disdain. As Earth's influence in the galaxy grew, so too did the skepticism of the older species, most notably the Thuric Dominion. Jenna had prepared for months, running through every potential scenario. The Council's opinions on humanity were divided. While a few races praised humanity's technological advancements, others, like the Thuric, saw them as dangerous and unpredictable. Today's meeting was no different. The topic was supposed to be economic cooperation and trade routes, but Jenna knew all too well that it would quickly turn into a referendum on human ambition. Representative Voss, a voice boomed from across the room. Sazdar, the Thuric Dominion's counselor, leaned forward in his chair, his cold, reptilian eyes fixed on her. His species was older than humanity by millennia, and they were known for their ruthless politics. His scaly skin glistened under the bright lights of the chamber, his posture unervingly composed. It is our understanding that humanity fears war, yet wishes to spread its influence across the galaxy. How do you reconcile this contradiction? Jenna's lips tightened. She had been prepared for this. She had known Sazdar would strike first, his words venomous as usual. The Thuric had a long-standing history of antagonism toward Earth, seeing it as an upstart, an ambitious species unwilling to remain in its place. Fear of war, Counselor? Jenna's voice rang clear, controlled, despite the rising tide of frustration. Humanity has fought wars, yes, but we've learned from them. We've learned what it costs. We don't fear war, we fear the destruction it leaves behind. It's why we seek peace in our expansion, not domination. A few of the council members murmured in agreement, but Sazdar was unshaken. He leaned back, his sharp gaze never leaving her. But your people's history is riddled with conflict, he countered, his tone condescending. Civil wars, territorial disputes, internal strife. Your species has not yet learned how to maintain the peace you claim to cherish. Jenna's hand rested lightly on the table, her fingers curling into a fist. She could feel the eyes of the other representatives on her, waiting for her response. She had heard this before, the accusations of humanity's bloody past. She'd even heard them from her own people. But there was something in Sazdar's words that struck a chord, something that spoke to the very core of her, a simmering anger that refused to stay silent. You misunderstand, she said, her voice lowering but growing more intense. Humanity's past is not a chain we drag behind us, it's a lesson we carry with us. Every war, every conflict, every battle was not fought for power but for survival. And that is something you, she paused, feeling the weight of her words, you, the council, cannot comprehend. The silence that followed was thick. A few of the representatives exchanged glances, but none dared speak. Jenna could feel the tension pressing against her, the sharp glares from Sazdar's supporters. You believe that your species is the only one capable of understanding survival? Sazdar sneered, his elongated fingers drumming lightly on the table. How quaint. You are nothing more than a frightened child pretending to be an adult. Your rapid expansion, your weapons, your constant push to assert yourselves, it reeks of fear. And we do not reward fear here, Voss. Jenna's jaw clenched, but she held back the fury threatening to burst. She had been trained for this moment, but Sazdar was skilled in pushing every button. She straightened in her chair, her eyes hardening. Let me remind you, Counselor, Jenna said, her words sharp like the edge of a blade. Humanity has been through the fire. We were born in the chaos of conflict. Our rise, our success, it's not built on fear. It's built on determination, on the will to survive, and to protect those we care for. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. We will not bow to anyone who believes that strength comes only from oppression. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Some of the representatives shifted uncomfortably, others exchanged uncertain glances. Jenna knew she had made her point, but she could see Sazthar wasn't finished. His thin lips curled into a smile, one that made her stomach twist. He was baiting her. Perhaps you should take your own advice, Representative Voss, Sazthar said, his voice smooth and deliberate. Perhaps humanity's strength is not as great as you think, if it can be so easily provoked. A cold silence followed, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Jenna took a breath, her hands now steady on the table. She could feel the heat rising, but she knew she could not let the baited challenge slip into anger. The strength of humanity, she said slowly, is not found in the weapons we wield or the wars we've fought. It's in our capacity to endure, to adapt, to learn from our mistakes. Her eyes met Sazdhar's, unflinching. And if you push us, counselor, you will see that strength tested in ways you may not expect. There it was. The room was still, the tension thickening. The old enemies were circling, and Jenna could feel the storm building. Sazthar was no fool. He had purposefully provoked her. But he had underestimated something. Humanity might have known war, but it also knew what it meant to stand up and fight for a future. Perhaps we'll see, Voss, Sazthar said, his voice a mere whisper now. Perhaps we'll see. Jenna didn't reply. The chamber was holding its breath, waiting. The debate had only just begun, but it had already become clear. This would not be a simple discussion. For humanity, the stakes were higher than ever before. The quiet hum of the council chamber persisted, a faint buzz in the background of the heated debates. Jenna Voss leaned back in her chair, her hands clasped together in front of her. The room still simmered with tension after her exchange with Sazthar. The Thuric representative had barely given her a chance to respond fully before he had launched into another round of criticisms. She could feel the eyes of the other representatives, some sympathetic, others skeptical, shift toward her. Humanity's place in the galaxy was on trial, and her every word would either reinforce or dismantle that position. Sazdhar's latest jab still lingered in the air like a bitter aftertaste. Humanity claims to seek peace, yet their very nature is marred by conflict, he had sneered. If your people truly understand the costs of war, then why does it seem as if war follows you wherever you go? Jenna hadn't answered him directly. Instead, she'd chosen her words carefully, explaining humanity's commitment to finding diplomatic solutions, despite its turbulent history. But the truth was, Sazdhar's words had struck a chord. She knew humanity had scars, just like every other species, but those scars were the foundation of their strength. And yet, here she was, struggling to convince an entire galaxy that humanity could be more than the sum of its violent past. Now, she sat in the rear corner of the chamber, reviewing the data points she had for the next round of discussions. A soft chime indicated the continuation of the meeting. She straightened, gathering her thoughts and shifting her attention to the central podium where the next speaker was preparing to address the room. A tall, slender figure strode to the center. It was Kara, a representative from the Zithral, a species that had long remained neutral in galactic conflicts but controlled a vast portion of the galactic trade route. Her species' gaze was always fixed on profits, but their opinion carried significant weight in matters of economic stability. She was one of the few who did not harbor any overt hostility toward humanity, yet her words had always been cautious, reserved. Jenna felt her eyes narrow in anticipation. "I believe we can all agree," Kara began, her voice cool, measured, "that the matter at hand is not whether humanity is capable of peace, it is whether they are capable of maintaining that peace in the face of inevitable conflict." Jenna's heart skipped. The words were blunt, almost accusatory, but not unexpected. Humanity's rapid rise had stirred anxiety. In many minds, a species so young, so untested, was a potential threat to the stability of galactic order. And while some viewed Earth as a promising partner, others believed that humanity's true strength, its violent history, its survival instincts, was a ticking time bomb. Kara continued, her yellow eyes scanning the room. Humanity's military power is not insignificant. That alone would be enough to warrant suspicion, but it is the manner in which humanity expands that raises concern. Their sheer audacity in claiming new systems, in asserting their right to grow, without consideration for those already settled, is troubling. Peace is not just the absence of war. It is the result of diplomacy and mutual respect, something that humanity has yet to master. Sazthar, seated 2 rows over, subtly nodded in agreement. Jenna felt the burn of his approval, the unmistakable smugness in his expression. The words stung, but she held herself together. Kara's criticism was more diplomatic than Sazdhar's outright disdain, but the implication was clear. Humanity's expansion was viewed as reckless, akin to a storm that would eventually consume everything in its path. Jenna stood up, her eyes meeting Kara's with steady defiance. She knew that this moment could define everything. She could not let the narrative spin out of control. Representative Kara, she began, her voice calm yet firm, with all due respect, humanity's expansion is not one of conquest, but of survival. We are not here to dismantle existing power structures. We are here to coexist. Our rise has been one of overcoming, of learning from past mistakes. We seek peace, but not at the expense of our future. She paused, watching as some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Peace requires strength. Strength requires preparation. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some representatives exchanged uneasy glances, but Kara's sharp gaze never wavered. I am not blind to your people's resilience, Representative Voss, Kara replied, her voice tight, but there is a fine line between resilience and recklessness. You speak of survival, but what I hear is fear. The fear of being left behind, the fear of losing your place at the table. Humanity wants more than peace, it wants to control. Jenna's fingers tightened around the edges of the podium. She could feel her patience thinning. This wasn't a debate about human nature, it was an attack on humanity's right to thrive. She had expected this, but the words still stung. Humanity had fought for its place at the table, true, but they had never done so at the expense of others. To have that insinuated, to be told that all they wanted was control, power, domination, it was infuriating. Fear, she repeated, her voice quiet but fierce. Humanity doesn't fear losing its place, Kara. We fear the destruction of everything we've fought for. We fear the complacency of those who sit at this table, too afraid to change the status quo. My people, my species, have faced annihilation. We've survived against odds you couldn't imagine. And you dare call that fear? The room went silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. For a brief moment, even Kara's eyes flickered with something akin to respect, before quickly returning to her usual coldness. Enough, Representative Voss, Sazdar interjected, his voice a low growl. You are speaking of survival, but you fail to recognize the true cost of that survival. Humanity's expansion is not a peaceful venture. It is an aggressive one. You claim diplomacy, but your actions speak louder. Your weapons, your fleets, they are not the tools of peace. Jenna shot him a glance, her face hardening. We use them to protect peace, Counselor, she retorted sharply. Our weapons are a deterrent, not a declaration of war. If you cannot see that, then you are no better than the tyrants who seek to control us. Another silence fell over the room. This time, the murmurs were louder. There was a visible divide in the council, with some races beginning to look more sympathetic toward humanity's cause. Jenna could sense that the balance was shifting. She was not the only one who believed in humanity's right to expand, to thrive. But that didn't mean the fight was over. Sazdar's lips curled into a smile, but it was colder now. A deterrent, he repeated, as if savoring the word. Perhaps. But for how long, Representative? How long before humanity's deterrence becomes a reason to fight? Jenna didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. The answer was clear in her mind, and the truth of it was irrefutable. Humanity would not bow. They would not be subjugated, not now, not ever. And if that meant fighting, then so be it. I don't fear war, Counselor, she said, her voice ringing out with unshakable conviction. I fear what happens when the galaxy forgets that peace must be earned, by everyone. The chamber was quiet again, but this time it was the silence of contemplation. The lines had been drawn. The argument was far from over, but humanity's stance had been made clear. The council chamber had quieted, but the storm within it was far from over. The heavy air, thick with unresolved tension, clung to Jenna as she made her way back to her seat. She could feel the eyes of every representative in the room tracking her movements. Some were wary, others curious. None were truly sympathetic. This wasn't just a meeting about trade routes anymore. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. And with every passing moment, that place seemed more uncertain. Jenna sat, keeping her back straight and her expression neutral, though her mind raced. The debate had taken a dangerous turn, and she knew that if she didn't shift the conversation soon, the council would fall into a stalemate. The words of Sazdar, Kara, and even the murmurs from the other species echoed in her ears. Humanity's fear, humanity's aggression, humanity's desire for control. Every attack was another weight pressing down on her shoulders. She glanced across the room, her eyes locking with those of the Zenthian delegate, Tyrus. He had been silent through much of the debate, his features inscrutable. The Zenthian were a species known for their calculated neutrality, neither allies nor enemies to anyone, and their opinion often swayed the balance of power. If Tyrus remained silent for much longer, the council would be lost. Jenna needed to shift the debate, and fast. The moment seemed to stretch on forever as the council members resumed whispering amongst themselves. It was clear they were forming their next lines of attack. The constant pressure was unbearable, but Jenna focused on the issue at hand: survival. She didn't have the luxury of folding under the weight of these accusations. If she did, humanity's future would be decided for them. The stakes had always been high, but now they were life or death. I believe, Jenna's voice sliced through the room, steady and clear, that the true issue here is not humanity's past, but our future. You say we fear war, but I'm telling you we fear being left to fight alone. We fear being pushed into a corner with no hope of survival. Her eyes scanned the room, catching each representative's gaze. But more than that, we fear inaction. We fear the complacency that allows tyrants to rise unchecked. The words hung in the air. The silence in the room was heavy, each delegate considering her statement, weighing its meaning. Jenna could feel the tides of the debate shifting, but there was no time to waste. She needed to be precise, to dismantle their doubts and remind them of humanity's strength, not through power but through resilience. She continued, her tone not rising, but carrying an undeniable strength. Our history is marked by survival. Yes, we have fought. Yes, we have bled. But we have always rebuilt. We have learned from our scars and we've forged alliances when we could. That's who we are. And if you want to know why we don't fear war, it's because we've stared it in the face more times than any species here could imagine. There was a sharp intake of breath from the volar representative, Goran, a hulking species known for their brute strength and aggressive expansionism. His tusked face twisted in thought, but Jenna was quick to seize the moment. Humanity doesn't seek war, we seek stability. We seek cooperation. If we're aggressive, it's because the galaxy hasn't yet learned how to value what we offer. But we will learn. We will grow. And the day will come when humanity will stand beside each of you, equal, respected, not feared. Sazthar's lip curled in disdain, but he did not speak. Kara, however, shifted in her seat. She had been quiet for too long. The Zithral were known for their meticulous trade dealings, but their political statements always carried weight. She was calculating, but Jenna's words had struck a nerve. The problem, Representative Voss, Kara spoke slowly, is not humanity's strength. It's the unpredictability of your species. You speak of resilience, but where is the evidence of consistency? Where is the proof that humanity can maintain the peace you claim to seek? Jenna met her gaze unwaveringly. The proof is in our actions. Humanity has made peace with enemies once thought insurmountable. We've rebuilt broken alliances, helped restore shattered worlds. And while others turn a blind eye to injustice, humanity steps in. A murmur ran through the room. There was no denying it. Humanity's involvement in the Galactic Coalition's peacekeeping forces had made a lasting impression. Earth's forces had brokered ceasefires between feuding races, negotiated trade agreements that had brought stability to previously volatile systems. The galaxy had seen humanity's capability for cooperation, but it was still being measured against the old, ingrained assumptions about their nature. Tyrus, who had been watching the exchange with quiet contemplation, finally spoke. His voice was low, but his words carried. What you're saying, Representative Voss, is that humanity can be trusted. That despite your history, your rise, your presence in the galaxy, despite your fear of losing it all, you believe that Earth will honor its word. Jenna nodded, not hesitating. Yes, humanity has fought for everything we have, but we're not driven by greed. We're driven by the need to survive, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her voice hardened, tinged with the passion of someone who had seen the cost of ignoring that duty. And if we cannot find peace through diplomacy, then we will fight, not for domination, but for our future. Tyrus's piercing gaze lingered on her for a moment before he nodded, the smallest of gestures that spoke volumes. The Zenthian's neutrality might have been a shield, but it was now a weapon aimed squarely at the heart of those who doubted humanity. His support would carry weight. Sazthar, ever the thorn in humanity's side, could not remain silent. You're playing a dangerous game, Representative Voss. You claim to want peace, but your methods, your insistence on defense, your increasing fleet, how long before the galaxy realizes that humanity's vision of peace is simply a veneer for war? Jenna's eyes flicked to the Thuric representative, her voice sharp. And how long, Counselor, before the galaxy realizes that your vision of peace is nothing but the status quo, preserving power for those who have had it for millennia, while the rest of us are left to fight for a place at the table? Her words cut through the tension like a blade. For a moment the council was quiet. Jenna knew the old guard of the galaxy. Those like Sazthar and Kara would not change overnight. But there were cracks, subtle but growing, in their positions. Humanity was no longer a passive player in galactic affairs. They had fought for their survival, and now they would fight for their seat among the stars. As the session neared its end, Jenna felt a strange sense of accomplishment. The path ahead was still fraught with uncertainty, but one thing had become clear. Humanity would no longer be underestimated. The future was uncertain, yes, but the galaxy would learn to reckon with Earth, and that, Jenna knew, was just the beginning. Jenna Voss stood at the edge of the council chamber, staring out at the vast expanse of space visible through the wall of transparent metal. The stars were scattered across the inky blackness, countless lights flickering in the distance. It was a sight she had seen many times, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, the future of humanity, perhaps the future of the entire galaxy, was being decided in this very room. The session had gone on for hours, and the debate had only grown more heated. She had held her ground against every accusation, every doubt thrown her way. Yet, despite her best efforts, Sazthar and his allies refused to see humanity's position as anything other than a threat. And now, as the final vote loomed, Jenna was left with one last chance to sway the room. One final plea for humanity's right to thrive without fear of reprisal. She turned her back to the view and faced the room once more. The chamber was quieter now, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The delegates had grown weary, but the stakes had never been higher. Their eyes were on her, waiting for the final statement. Jenna stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. Members of the Galactic Council, I will not stand here and continue to justify humanity's existence, nor will I plead for mercy. Humanity has earned its place among the stars. We have fought for it, bled for it, and in doing so, we have forged a legacy of survival, of resilience. We will not be silenced. The room was still. For a moment, no one spoke, and Jenna could feel the weight of the silence pressing against her. Sazthar's cold eyes never left her. He had fought tooth and nail to keep humanity at bay, to keep Earth relegated to the periphery. But Jenna could see the cracks in his resolve now. The doubts were creeping in, as much as he tried to hide them. You speak of survival, Representative Voss, Sazthar finally said, his voice tight. But survival alone does not guarantee a place in the galaxy. Strength alone does not make a species worthy of trust. You ask for peace, yet you wear the face of a warrior. You demand respect, but what you truly seek is domination. Jenna's expression remained calm, though her heart beat faster. This was it, the moment when everything she had fought for could be shattered. She took a deep breath before responding. You misunderstand, Counselor. Humanity does not seek domination. What we seek is to protect the future. To ensure that our children, our people, and all those who believe in peace, can thrive without fear of annihilation. You claim we are warriors, but you overlook what it takes to survive. To rebuild. You see us as a threat because you refuse to see us as equals. There was a flicker of movement at the far end of the room. Tyrus, the Zenthian delegate, leaned forward slightly. His eyes met Jenna's, and for the first time, she saw something resembling agreement. He wasn't one to make hasty decisions, but his neutral stance had been shifting ever since their earlier exchanges. Jenna seized on it. I do not expect you to understand our journey, Counselor, Jenna continued, her voice unwavering. But I will not apologize for it. Humanity has fought countless battles, not for conquest, but for survival. We did not come to this galaxy to dominate, we came to be part of it, to contribute to the peace you claim to uphold. If that threatens your position, then I say, let it. The room stirred, and Jenna knew she had struck a nerve. The leaders of the galaxy had lived for millennia, watching empires rise and fall, but humanity had come from nothing and rapidly established itself as a formidable force. They weren't used to that kind of audacity. It unsettled them. Kara, the Zithral delegate, finally broke her silence. You speak of survival, Representative Voss. But survival, as we all know, requires more than brute strength. It requires diplomacy, strategy, and wisdom. Can humanity provide that, when faced with the complexities of intergalactic politics? Or will your people simply resort to war at the slightest provocation? Jenna's eyes hardened. Humanity's wisdom lies in its capacity to adapt, to learn from every failure, to grow stronger with every setback. We are not perfect, but we have learned from our mistakes. That is what makes us different from the other species here. We do not fear change. We embrace it. The tension in the room thickened. Kara's sharp eyes narrowed, but she said no more. The Zithral representative understood the weight of Jenna's words. Humanity's willingness to adapt was its greatest strength, and they had shown it time and time again. While other species clung to old power structures, humanity's very survival had depended on innovation. As Jenna stood in the quiet, her thoughts raced. Sazthar and his allies had made it clear they were not ready to accept humanity as an equal. But the other delegates, those who had been watching closely, were beginning to see the truth in her words. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. Then, as the council prepared to take the final vote, something unexpected happened. Goran, the Volar delegate, stood up. His massive form cast a long shadow across the room, and for a moment, the air seemed to crackle with the anticipation of what he would say. The Volar were a proud and aggressive species, but they valued strength and respect above all else. Goran had been silent throughout the meeting, but now, his voice boomed through the chamber. "We have listened to your words, Representative Voss," Goran said. "And we are not blind. Humanity is not without its flaws. But neither is it the threat some would have us believe. We, too, have fought for our place in the galaxy. And we understand that survival is a battle not for domination, but for the right to exist." Jenna's eyes widened slightly as Goran's words sank in. This was it. The shift she had been hoping for. The Volar were no allies of humanity, but their endorsement carried significant weight. She had managed to convince them that humanity was not the enemy. "We will stand with humanity," Goran declared, his voice resonating in the chamber. "Not because we trust them fully, but because they have proven that they will fight for what they believe in. And that is a value we can respect." Sazthar's expression darkened, his eyes flashing with fury, but he did not speak. The room was alive with murmurs, and Jenna felt a surge of hope rising within her. The balance had shifted. Humanity was no longer the outlier, the rogue element in the galaxy. They had found their place. The final vote was called. The council members cast their votes, one by one. Jenna's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for the results. The tension in the air was palpable. Finally, the results flashed across the screen. Humanity had been granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Jenna allowed herself a brief breath of relief, but the weight of the moment settled back in. This victory was not just hers, it was humanity's. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, Jenna knew one thing for certain. Humanity had earned its place, and the galaxy would never again look at Earth as anything less than an equal. The vote was over, and the decision had been made. Humanity had secured its place among the stars, no longer a fringe player, no longer a rogue element in the galaxy's complex web of politics. As Jenna Voss walked out of the council chamber, the weight of the moment settled on her like a cloak. She had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The corridors of the Galactic Council were empty as she made her way to the secure transport bay, the only sound the rhythmic echo of her boots on the polished floor. The starlight from the massive windows bathed the space in a cold, sterile glow. She could hear her own breathing, steady and controlled, as her mind raced. The council had voted in humanity's favor, but what did that mean now? What would the galaxy expect from Earth? She stopped in her tracks. What does it mean for humanity? Jenna had spent years navigating the labyrinth of galactic politics, first as a junior diplomat, then as a rising star within the Galactic Coalition. She had fought tooth and nail for this moment, but now that it was real, the enormity of it all pressed in on her. She wasn't just representing Earth anymore. She was carrying the hopes of an entire species, a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a distant planet, a species that had fought wars and overcome obstacles no one else could even fathom. And now, that species had to prove itself on a galactic scale. She arrived at the transport bay to find her team waiting for her. Her closest allies, the ones who had helped her navigate the dangerous waters of intergalactic diplomacy. They were all smiles, their faces lit with relief and triumph, but Jenna could see the unspoken questions in their eyes. What comes next? "We did it, Jenna," Marcus said, his voice warm with pride. "We actually did it." Jenna nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've taken the first step. But the real work begins now." Her team fell silent. Marcus, ever the optimist, leaned against the wall, his arms folded across his chest. "You've got a point. The real question is, what happens now that we've got their attention?" "We can't afford to rest," Jenna said, turning to face him. "This is only the beginning. The vote was just the first hurdle, but the galaxy's a big place. We need to make sure humanity's voice isn't just heard, but respected." Tyler, a quiet strategist who had been with her through thick and thin, finally spoke. So, what's our next move? Now that we're official members of the Council, we can't afford to alienate anyone, especially the factions who didn't support us. Jenna ran a hand through her hair, her mind already whirling through the possible scenarios. We need to strengthen our alliances. We've earned a seat at the table, but we haven't proven we belong yet. We've got to show them that humanity is more than just a survivor, it's a force for stability, for cooperation. Stability, Marcus repeated. You make it sound so easy. But we both know the galaxy's anything but stable. If we want to make a real difference, we need to get ahead of the curve, anticipate the conflicts before they spiral out of control. Jenna's gaze hardened. Exactly. We've been pushed into a corner for far too long. Now it's time to push back. Not with violence, but with diplomacy, aggressive diplomacy, if that's what it takes. We need to force the galaxy to take us seriously. Her team exchanged glances, and for a moment, the silence was heavy with the weight of their mission. They weren't just diplomats anymore. They were pioneers, stepping into a new role, not as subordinates but as equals. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had changed the game. As they boarded the transport, the sleek, metal doors slid shut behind them. Jenna stared out the viewport, watching the Council's headquarters shrink into the distance as the ship powered up. They were heading back to Earth, back to the home they had fought so hard to protect. The familiar weight of the atmosphere settled in, and for a fleeting moment, Jenna felt at peace. But that peace was short-lived. Jenna, Tyler's voice broke through her thoughts. We've got a message. It's from the Zenthian delegation. Jenna's heart skipped a beat. She had known this wasn't over. The Zenthian had been quiet during the vote, their neutrality giving them the power to influence the outcome without directly engaging. But now, it seemed, they had something to say. She stood up and walked over to the console, pressing a few buttons to bring up the message. The screen flickered, then displayed the image of Tyrus, the Zenthian delegate, his angular features unreadable as always. Representative Voss, Tyrus said, his voice calm and measured. I trust you are aware of the outcome of today's session. Jenna nodded. Yes, we've seen the results. Humanity has been granted full membership. A historic moment indeed, Tyrus continued. However, I believe you and your people must understand that this is only the beginning. Your ascent to the Council is notable. But the real challenge begins now. The galaxy does not care for newcomers, especially those who rise so quickly. Jenna's jaw tightened. I'm aware of that. I'm sure you are. But understand this. The Zenthian do not trust easily. And while you may have earned your place at the table, trust is something that must be built over time. You will be watched. Every decision you make, every step you take will be scrutinized. We're not asking for trust, Jenna said, her voice firm. We're asking for the opportunity to prove ourselves. Then prove it, Tyrus said, his tone now slightly less neutral. Humanity is entering a new era. The galaxy is watching. And whether you succeed or fail will shape not only your future but the future of the entire galaxy. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Jenna standing in front of the screen, her mind buzzing. This was no longer just about diplomacy. It was about survival on a grand scale. Humanity had earned a seat at the table, but now they had to show that they could play the game. The Zenthian had made it clear. The stakes were high. The galaxy wasn't handing out favors, and humanity's place was precarious. But Jenna felt the fire ignite within her once more. She had faced impossible odds before, and now she would face them again. We're ready, she muttered to herself as the transport continued its journey home. In that moment, Jenna realized something profound. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for far too long. But now, humanity would be the one doing the underestimating. The future was theirs to shape, and nothing would stand in their way.